No, in this one we're going to be talking about sperm counts, specifically why they're falling, what declining global fertility might mean, and what can be done about it. Before we start, we're very rapidly closing in on 100,000 subscribers on this channel. So if you want to help TLDR Global bag a silver play button, want to get more content from us, and make our channel stats swell faster than some of the things we're going to be discussing in this video, then hit the button down below. Thanks so much for your support. So let's talk sperm counts. Sperm count is defined as the number of sperm per milliliter of semen, and is associated with a whole load of good things. High sperm count predicts a decreased risk of testicular cancer, decreased all-cause mortality and morbidity, and obviously makes it easier to conceive if that's something you're into. The reason we're doing this video, however, is because sperm counts have been falling since the 1970s, and falling especially fast in the Western world. A 2017 meta-analysis of 185 studies involving about 43,000 men found that the mean sperm count in Europe, North America, Australia and New Zealand, so basically Western men, had fallen from about 99 million sperm per milliliter of semen to 47.1 million in 2011. That's more than a 50% decrease. Similarly, total sperm count has fallen from 337 million sperm per ejaculation in 1973 to 137 million in 2011. That's more than a 60% decrease. So not only do men have lower sperm counts, they're also producing less semen overall. If sperm counts did continue to fall at this same rate, then they'd reach zero by 2045. Now, this is something that the scientific community has known about for a while. In 1992, a well-cited paper by Carlson et al. Found that sperm count had fallen from about 113 million per milliliter in 1940 to 66 million per milliliter in 1990. Obviously, this was a controversial and alarming conclusion, so scientists have been checking and double-checking the data ever since. But there's now a consensus that sperm counts are indeed dropping, and dropping fast. So why is this? Well, there's less consensus here. However, scientists do know and agree that stress, smoking, obesity, diet, and even pesticides can play a role in sperm count. Although Western men smoke less than their parents and grandparents, they do have higher levels of obesity on average, and some data suggests that they have higher stress levels, which would go some way towards explaining the drop in sperm count. But another major factor are so-called reprotoxic chemicals. Reprotoxic chemicals are basically chemicals that mess with our reproductive system and are often found in plastics. Some of these chemicals, including perfluoroalkyl and polyfluoroalkyl substances, are known as forever chemicals because they don't break down in the body or in the environment. And these chemicals are found in everything, from plastic containers and electronic devices to even ski wax, which is why 99.7% of Americans have some level of perfluorinated chemicals within their bodies. They're also found in tap water, which is why local water quality is a good predictor of sperm count. A study for the Icahn School of Medicine found that from 2017 to 2007, sperm count fell in Los Angeles, Palo Alto, Houston, and Indianapolis, but stayed consistent in New York City and Boston, the cities with the highest quality water supply. And these chemicals don't only damage sperm count, they also increase the chances of genital abnormalities, miscarriages, early onset puberty in girls, and erectile dysfunction in boys. Potentially more terrifyingly for some, they shrink penises. Yeah, that's right. Exposure to PFASs and similar chemicals can cause a reduction in both penile length and girth. An Italian study found that young men with these pollutants in their systems feature an average 12.5% reduction in length and 6.3% reduction in girth. And that's a pretty significant difference, between about an inch and half an inch. So how can we stop our sperm counts from dropping and our penises from shrinking? Well, appropriate legislation would be a start. The US is making progress on this front, with a new EPA law on PFASs coming in last June. This new law was able to pass despite attempts from the Trump administration to suppress the EPA's report, which they described as a public relations nightmare. Controversially though, the FDA still allows authorized amounts of bisphenol A in products, a well-known endocrine disruptor. The EU has pretty comprehensive legislation on this. The EU's REACH regulation is a database of about 25,000 chemicals, and has restricted several phthalates in toys, as well as setting limits on phthalates which are considered reprotoxic in food production. The EU also considers bisphenol A as a chemical of very high concern, and banned its use from baby bottles in 2011. This decision was challenged in court 3 times by Plastics Europe, a trade association representing plastics manufacturers in the EU. And this is actually a major reason why legislation can be so slow. Big companies like Plastics Europe in the EU and DuPont and 3M in the US regularly lobby governments and challenge regulations like these in court. But what about the UK? Well, pre-Brexit, the UK also used the EU's REACH legislation. Post-Brexit, the UK's brought out its own REACH, which currently mirrors the EU's legislation, but the UK can diverge from this list if it wants to. However, the UK could still do a lot more. For example, the UK doesn't test drinking water for PFASs, and only asks water companies to, quote, consider PFOS and PFOA levels. As you might expect, water companies don't like snitching on themselves, which is why there's been no notifications of an event associated with elevated levels of any of these chemicals to DEFRA since 2005. Basically, the current UK legislation politely asks water companies to say if their water has high levels of PFASs, and unsurprisingly, they don't. So the long and short of it is that among other factors, plastics chemicals are reducing sperm counts and penis sizes, and current legislation seems to fall short. As a final note, all of these things are clearly bad, but a falling fertility rate isn't in itself necessarily a bad thing. Governments typically don't like low fertility rates because smaller, older populations are economically suboptimal. And while that might be true, there's a separate question as to what makes a population morally optimal. We might actually consider smaller, happier populations to be morally preferable to larger, resource-stressed populations, and a falling fertility rate in a country might actually help that. We're not trying to say anything controversial here, just whether we consider falling fertility to be a bad thing will depend on our intuitions about population ethics, and that's complicated. For anyone interested in the philosophy of why population ethics is so complicated, then consider Googling the repugnant conclusion. Anyway,